In this video I'm going to be attaching the newly repaired floor to the bulkhead. In order to do that I need to remove what's left of the suspension mount and the reinforcement panels that are still covering the main bulkhead panel. You can see me removing them here using grinders and air saws and air chisels and stuff like that. It took quite some time because access was pretty tricky, but eventually I was able to see the base panel and see what it needed in terms of repair work. I've been removing sections in large continuous pieces so that I can use them as templates and guides in order to make the new replacement parts. So obviously I'm trying to distort it as little as possible. I still have the other side to work off, but it's always best to have extra if you can. As you can see, the bulkhead didn't escape the rust, but there are some clean sections to it, and that's the last layer, so I don't need to remove that to gain any more access. So I repair that by fitting this piece that I've fabricated off camera. It's a fairly simple piece, it's just two flanges and a step lap at the side and some punched holes in the bottom. I did attempt to MIG weld it for the spot welds here, but it didn't hold very well. I've only just got this welder and I'm not used to the settings on it yet. As you can see here, it didn't hold well at all. It's always best to check your work. So after repairing the panel I've just made, this is round 2. Whenever you're doing a plug weld with a MIG welder, it's always best to get the panel gap to absolutely 0. It needs to be really tight, otherwise it's just never going to fuse. And obviously you need the settings right. More voltage and less wire speed usually than you would normally use for something similar. It's always best to check from multiple angles to make sure you've got everything lined up perfectly before doing the first tack welds, because they're the most crucial. Once it's lined up right, then you don't need to worry about it so much anymore. You just need to make sure the gap's right and then continue to weld. But yeah, those two first tack welds, they're the most critical. The first one, you can move it a little bit. The second one, it's locked in place. As you can see here, I'm just continuing to weld it and make sure the gaps are right, and just little adjustments as I go, little taps with the hammer. Just making sure the gap's spot on and everything's lined up perfect. I'm welding little sections at a time, little 25mm sections, spreading them out so that I'm not putting too much heat in one area at any one time, which helps avoid any kind of warping, and sure enough there wasn't any warping on this panel. Partly because of the structure of it. A 90 degree, well it's not quite 90, but an angle helps stop any kind of warping, so it's not as tricky as trying to weld something perfectly flat. But it's always good to stagger the welds and just limit the heat input. You'll also see me pulsing the trigger on the welder while I'm doing those little seams. I do this because it allows you to use more power, which leads to better penetration on the weld. If you don't do that and you try to continually seam it, you'll end up using a lot less power and getting a lot less penetration than you could if you pulse it. There is a concern of getting inclusions in the weld doing it this way, but it's less of a concern than not getting good penetration and good fusing of the two panels. It's not really a concern on this type of welding anyway, and I'm not fully allowing it to cool down. It's just going slightly orange, and then I continue and do another pulse. You see me constantly checking around to the other side of the panel just to make sure nothing's setting on fire or doing anything it shouldn't be. There's still some sound deadening away from the weld area that wasn't removed, so it's a possibility. But always better to be safe than sorry. Regular checks all the time. As you can see here, I've switched over to the TIG welder because I wasn't confident in the MIG. The first few held perfect, but I wasn't confident that I could get the same result on all of them. Especially with it being upside down, it's awkward to do a plug weld, as they call it, like that, because gravity's against you, not helping you. So with the TIG welder, I can see the two panels fusing as I go, and I know it's perfectly sound. Here I've jumped back to the MIG welder just to fill in any little gaps that I burnt through with the TIG welder, because it was close to the edge of the panel. Some of the spot welds burnt through to the edge, so I fill the gaps with the MIG welder and then grind it perfect again. Right, that's the lower bulkhead section welded in, mating to the floor. I had a bit of a nightmare doing the spot welds across here, just because it's a new MIG welder to me, and well, it's a brand new MIG welder and new mask, and couldn't get the settings right, so took the safe bet and TIG welded the rest of them, so it's nice and solid. But yeah, I mean, the floor's got some strength in it now. It sounds solid rather than that sort of thing. I did consider making that piece and that piece in one section and replacing the lot, even though that middle bit's alright. But I got concerned that I was cutting a bit too much out of the car in one go, and I was worried things might start moving, so I decided to put a bit more strength back in it first with that, and then move on to that section there. After that, it's the, I don't know what you'd call this, bulkhead reinforcement perhaps, and then there's a closing piece that comes across here. I might have to put the side piece on that I've already made. Needs a bit of trimming, but I'll give you an end stop to work to, and then I'll be able to work it out where it needs to be and everything. Then I need to rebuild the box that goes around the actual mount for the suspension, but I've still got the other side somewhere near intact, at least enough to know what it's meant to look like. Yeah, it's starting to come together. It's got some strength back in it. That's another day's progress though. Yeah, with this I went for a lap joint, a stepped lap joint, rather than the butt welds that I've been doing underneath. Mainly because I can't really get at the back of it, the inside, to dress it off, so there'll be less clean-up to do with a lap joint than a butt weld. And this doesn't look that neat at the moment, but this will be completely enclosed. You'll never see that. There's a whole triangular section that forms this bottom of the bulkhead firewall area here for strength. So that's all hidden, and the underside, it's all effectively spot welded, so that's all like factoring. So yeah, happy with that, and Some more progress soon.